About 32 years ago, we came down to the South Caribbean and met with Carpetchel and stayed at his beautiful place, the El Pazote Lodge. We thought we might like to own a piece of paradise, but we didn't want to do it without the friends that we had that were attorneys in San Jose, so we got together, formed a corporation, and bought ourselves 12 hectares of paradise. What we purchased was inside the Gandoca National Wildlife Reserve, and we knew that came with certain responsibilities. We were all at the beginning of our careers at that time, so our primary interest was just preservation of the land. So we understood that we had to pay our taxes on the deeded land and on the maritime zone, which we did. We were told to keep the ground scrubbed down, so we kept clearing that annually and hired the local people to do that. At the time of purchase, there was an Indian living on the property from Nicaragua. We were told he was a squatter, but we were very happy to pay him to do certain work on the property and to hire other people in the local community to help us, and we enjoyed having him there. He provided us with security, and we provided him with some income. Eventually, the war was over in Nicaragua, and our friend decided to go home. So we hired a local gentleman by the name of Mario Jimenez. We built Mario a house on the property, and he raised his family. He was there for 22 years. He helped access local labor to help clear our grounds annually, and he provided security for the property. While we didn't have any specific plan in mind as to what we wanted to do, we thought it would be a good idea to determine what was the highest and best use for the land. So we hired a surveyor. He brought in a couple of architects that came up with some ideas, and we had a plan for a natural living environment that we thought would be very much in keeping with the local community. We took the plan to the Menai to see how they would feel about it so that we would maybe not get a permit, but just get a head nod as to whether they felt that this was in keeping with what would be acceptable inside the Gandoca Wildlife Refuge. They loved that we were not trying to build some big hotel and marina and all that, and so they were very positive about it. And since we weren't in the position to start to build and there was no regulatory plan, then we just moved on and just continued to preserve and protect the land. In 2001, a law enforcement officer from the Menai by the name of Jorge Hudson Chillet came onto the property and threatened Mario with a gun and instructed him to say nothing to the owners. He and a group of others took down our fences, started building their own and subdividing the lots around the maritime zone. And I believe they actually created a website to focus on selling to Europeans. We caught them pretty quickly, and that involved an immediate lawsuit and criminal case. And being officer of the law himself, he had a certain amount of weight in the local area, so the Bree courts sided with him. But fortunately for us, we took it to the next level and went to the Agrarian National Court of Appeals, and they looked at the evidence and they handed down a decision that this belonged to Comika SA, so we got it back. Although Mr. Chillet had to sign a document that he had no interest whatsoever in the land, that didn't stop him from creating a criminal lawsuit against our partner, Jose Pablo, the attorney who represented the case, and he just simply said that Jose Pablo had committed fraud from the very beginning when we bought the property. In 2001, Jose Pablo was a young attorney in the banking industry with a young family. He didn't have the time to go out and defend a frivolous lawsuit. So he went back to Mr. Chillet and said, what is this going to take to settle and be done with this? And Mr. Chillet said that he wanted a certain amount of money. So we ended up agreeing that we would give him $75,000 US dollars at closing to the buyer of our choice at the time of our choice. And we also had to agree to give him 60 days from that point of signing the agreement to sell the property, which we did. And nothing happened in that 60 days. But sometime later on, I don't know, it was a year later, he came back and said he had a buyer. So we said, okay, bring him forth. And he didn't bring him forth. So that was pretty much the end of that. Flash forward to 2009, there was not a whole lot that happened, but then he came back again with several other people. And this time he had done more of his homework. He actually had arranged to have all of our documents in the Bree records destroyed. And that didn't change the fact that they were also registered and certified in Limon and in San Jose, but he decided that the documents in the Bree records were enough, and he substituted his records and destroyed ours. It didn't seem to make any difference to him or any of the municipal directors that all these prior records and court documents certified the ownership by Kamika. They just simply destroyed all those records and just created new ones. The next thing that happened was that they brought in bulldozers and they built an illegal bridge across the river that separated our property from actually Cholette's property, which is adjacent to us on the north side. We found containers of Monsanto chemicals that were used to inject inside of the tree bases that robs the tree from being able to hydrate itself, taking groundwater and bringing it up into the root structure, and eventually that just makes the tree fall over. They removed a tremendous amount of trees from our maritime zone and then built about 11 different structures, from houses to little cabinas to shacks that were both on our deeded land as well as the maritime zone. So clearly their intention was to steal all of it. Then they started selling those lots and people started getting permits to build in the maritime zone. They subdivided into 10 different lots and permits were issued for each of them, and it took our attorneys quite some time to get that information from the municipality that did not want to give it up. The reason they don't want to give it up is because municipal directors have to sign off on those permits, and that exposes exactly the corruption that we're talking about here. We spent a great deal of time trying to get a district attorney to take on the case. It's an extremely complicated case because the Court of Appeals already made their decision on the land. At this point, we decided that since the legal system had done its job, that we just would take this to the Menai and find out, why are you not enforcing this ruling? After all, it was their employees invading the land. So through one of Jose Pablo's connections, we were introduced to Teofilo de la Torre Aguelo, who was the minister of the Menai, appointed by President Laura Chinchilla. He was pretty angered by what had happened, and so he decided to bring this directly to the president. President Chinchilla then decided to appoint a presidential commission of environmental engineers to go down to the property, see what had happened, and assess the damages. If interested, you can read that 50-page commission report that was sent to the president. The commission not only reported massive damage to trees, but also found destruction of wildlife, including dead toucans that we found hanging in a drying room, presumably to sell their beaks. Due to these complications, we struggled to find a district attorney who would even be willing to take on this case. These people had to work among the municipality, and I suspect they were in fear for their lives. After 17 district attorneys looked at our case and turned it down, and this is between 2011 and 2016, we finally found a young district attorney that actually did care about the environment and would take the case on. That case has now been pending since 2016, and it's now 2020, and we don't know when it's going to actually be heard, but we are hopeful that it will be within this year. In the meantime, the judge made it very clear to both sides that nobody is permitted to do anything with the maritime zone. And we've honored that, and we have not done anything to try to proceed with our plan, although we have come up with a great plan that we would certainly love to have all of you take a look at. That brings us to today. Our friend Chris has arrived in Manzanillo, and despite our efforts to continue to hire local people to provide security, Chris arrived and came to the property, and he found some other Americans that were actually on the property and building houses, despite what the judge had ordered. We don't have any evidence that these people are connected with Mr. Cholette in any way, but we do feel that they are playing the same game. They have gone in and they have bribed some local municipal people to get permits They're building illegally inside of the maritime zone where nothing can be built until a regulatory plan is put into effect. For the past year, we have been exploring the idea of creating a sustainable community of natural living, integrative farming, and learning. It is very much in keeping with the Paris Accord and the sustainable agreements at the United Nations signed recently in September by 198 nations. It's the very basis of which Costa Rica has been named as champions of the earth. We have always seen the value, but in the last year we have talked to educational institutions and philanthropists and organizations that fund this kind of thing. And we feel that there are huge dollars out there, and we don't need huge dollars. We need small dollars. But those dollars are absolutely not available when corruption is the day-to-day influence on the local economy. Our story is only one of many similar situations. The reality is this area does need foreign investment, but it doesn't need to be at the expense of the culture. In order to attract foreign investment, there has to be law and order. There has to be accountability, and it's only going to happen through governance. Hey, I listen to the news. I hear what's going on in our country, so we're not one to talk. The Caribe Sur has a great reputation in the eco-tourist industry, worldwide reputation. To continue and sustain the interest in ecotourism and what is now growing, which is educational tourism, there's going to have to be some significant changes. Law and order is a function of governance, but if you don't demand it from your governors, then your economy suffers. We know that those standards don't really exist today, but if we work together, maybe we can create them. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our story.